Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our course breakdown for this week's RBC Canadian Open. Gonna get you guys ready for all things TPC Toronto with a look at the course details, a hole-by-hole breakdown of this course, as well as my custom modeling and comp courses that I'm using to help identify my top plays. So by the end, you'll be an expert on everything to expect for this event. So without further ado, let's go ahead and hop on in. But first off, a look at those course details and exactly how this golf course sets up. This will be the first time we've seen this course on the regular PGA Tour, but we have seen it on some of the smaller circuits before. So it was one at -25 in the PGA Tour Canada. Also, the PGA Tour Americas only won it at -5, but that was after they did their renovation. And this year, it's going to play even harder than what we had there. But keep in mind that this is a much better field. I do think it's a pretty straightforward test. And unless it's real firm, really windy out there, it's probably going to play at least like 15 to -20 for a winner. So we'll talk about exactly why when we go hole by hole. But it's a short par 70. It's about 7,400 yards. Does look a little bit longer than a lot of par 70s, but I think that's a little bit misleading. When we go hole by hole, you guys will see it's not an overly demanding test with the length, but still going to have some medium to long irons for sure. You have some bent POA greens, also bluegrass rough, which the RBC Canadian Open has become really infamous for having almost US Open like rough. You can see it's starting at about 4 inches, so definitely going to be a factor. The green size are about your PGA Tour average. You only have 3 holes with water in play, so not a lot of that you have to worry about. It's more of just keeping the ball in the fairway, which after the renovation, they did tighten the fairways around here, and then hitting these greens, which are pretty large. They should be pretty receptive up there as well. Hence why I don't think the scoring is actually going to be that bad. If it was a little tighter off the tee, if they had trees to contend with, maybe greens that were a little bit more difficult, I could see it playing closer to like a -10, a -12 winning score, but it's just a little bit too straightforward for that. So I think it's a good test with the rough for what they're going to get at Oakmont, but a much easier test than what you're going to have at that sort of event. So it's our first time seeing it. There's obviously a lot of unknowns with this sort of venue, but that's what I'm seeing from the overhead view at this point. And now let's show you the shots required around here. So you start off with the starting par 5 is going to play longer for the tournament this year. It's worth noting that they did add about 250 yards to the golf course since you had these overhead views. So some of the holes will be 15 to 20 yards longer. Hole 1, an example of that, but still a very reachable par 5 as 560 yards is a cakewalk for a lot of these tour pros. Next up, you have hole 2, which is 473, one of the longer par 4s out here. It's worth noting that the landing areas are going to be a lot tighter this year. That's part of the renovation they did since last year. So though it looks like a really straightforward par 4, I'd have to imagine it's going to be a little bit harder for this year. Next up, we have 3, which is 440. It is a straightforward par 4. And really my one gripe with this golf course is that there's not enough trees and there's not enough dog legs to it. All the holes are pretty much straight up, which makes it an execution test. You hit the fairway, you hit the greens, if your ball striking's on, you're going to be towards the top end of that board. Hole 4 is 157 yards. It is the shortest par 3 around here, and I would say one of the easier holes as well. Hole 5 is 442, so it is another straightforward par 4, and there's nothing really to say on these holes. That's why I maybe want to criticize it a bit, because at least from the overhead views and what we've seen so far, it's not the best piece of architecture. Hole 6 is a potentially drivable par 4. It depends on the tee box and the wind direction, but without any sort of hazards in front of the green, most players are going to bang up a driver near that surface. Hole 7 is 235, so it is one of the longer par 3s out here, and it has water in play. But these tour pros, unless it's a tucked pin location, aren't going to have that much trouble with it, especially if conditions are a little bit softer this time of year. Next up, you have hole 8, which is not going to be hole 8. Hole 8 is actually going to be 17, so a little bit of a different routing that they have going on. So another pretty straightforward par 4, where we really don't have that much to say about it. Next up, we got 9, so let's get back on the right track. This is another straightforward par 4, and it's less than driver than a wedge in, so just not that much variety around here. You're going to hit less than driver, especially because they're making these landing areas just a little bit narrower. You're going to see a whole lot of players not hitting the big stick. 10 is 420. It's another less than driver hole. There's just no reason to hit it here. It'll be a tight fairway and then a wedge in. 11 is 171. So this is a par 3. You do have the water down the right. Right side pin locations look a little bit harder, but the rest of that green is going to be very accessible. 12 is 400 yards. another pitch and putt par 4 that you don't have to hit driver on. 13 is going to be a par 4, so this is going to be converted down. It'll be one of the harder holes that you have out here, so this is going to be kind of like hole 2. This is a 480-yard par 4, one of the ones that you just want to get out of there with a 4. 14 is 171, so a par 3 without any sort of water on it, but it is well protected by bunkers. 15 is 372. This one can be drivable if they can cut the corner like some of your longer players, but a lot of that depends on wind direction. If it is going anywhere towards that pin, I think you're going to see a lot of players take driver towards it. 16 is 465, so this is a pretty straightforward par 4, lengthier than some of the other ones, so I'd say one that most players are looking to make a 4 on. 17 is going to be hole 8, so we already went through that one before, but let's go to hole 8 number now, and this is going to be a long par 4 as well, so another one of the harder holes that you have out here, where they're converting it down to one of the longer holes, and it's going to play 530, so they're not really shortening that one up. And then finally, 18 is your finishing par 5, so 2 long holes to finish, but the second of which is going to be very scoreable. They are adding a new tee box way back here, so it's going to play closer to 580 yards. That's nearly a 50-yard difference from where you have it right now. You also have water in play in the second shot, which could make things a little bit difficult, but this golf course, at least from what I see with the overhead views, 15 to -20 winner. Unless you get any sort of weather that's throwing things off, these guys are going to be hitting a whole lot of fairways and having reasonable clubs into these greens. So I don't think it's going to cause them that much trouble, and I hope to be surprised by it. I hope I'm wrong. I hope it plays a little bit harder, gives these guys a little bit more of a test. Now that we've seen the course, let's look through the kind of stats I'm using to identify my top plays. So first off, we got the core 4 shots gained categories. That would be your off the tee approach around the green and your putting. You always want to include those in your shots gained analysis. It's worth noting though that the ball striking stats may be a little bit more important than the short game, and that's because this is a little bit of an execution test. You hit some fairways, you hit some greens, and you're going to find yourself towards the top end of the board. So off the tee, shots gained approach over the last 24 rounds, both important categories to look at, and that's not unique to this golf course though. We're always trying to find players that are excelling in how they're hitting the ball, as that is the most consistent part of golf from event to event. So your off the tee flushers are going to get a big markup in my modeling. Your approach flushers are going to be getting that same sort of treatment, and that's not unique though, so I don't think we have to spend that much time on the ball striking stats. Worth noting with the short game though that it's a little bit less emphasized around this kind of track, around the green especially. I'm not putting it that high in my modeling. Putting stats though, we can look at some bent POA numbers. That of course is the type of agronomy that you have at TPC Toronto. So trying to find guys that have excelled on this hybrid surface could prove fruitful here in 2025. So I've got some small sample size poppers towards the top. Canadian Ben Silverman, one of those kind of guys, but Sungjae Im has played a lot of golf this year and he's gaining 0.65 on this surface. You also have Justin Rose, Chandler Phillips, Wyndham Clark, and Rory McIlroy that are all into the dark green there. So players that are gaining strokes on the bent POA, and you can find with some ball striking form heading in, could be worth a few extra looks. I'm also looking at driving accuracy percentage, so with them narrowing some of those driving corridors, I do think that it's going to be super helpful to be able to keep the ball in play. So guys like a Sungjae Im are going to get a big tick up in my modeling, a Corey Connors as well. And really the sweet spot is we can find players that are accurate off the tee, really good with their ball striking heading in, and then decent putters on bent POA. Those are going to be some of your best plays of the week. So for example, Corey Connors, there's a reason why he's a 9.8 out of 10 and at number 5 in the model ranking this week. He checks a lot of the different boxes that we're looking for, and in particular, those first 4 that we've really pointed out. Rico Hoey is doing it a similar type of way, and then you can see a Shane Lowry down here too, accurate off the tee and gaining in both ball striking categories heading in. So those sort of players are going to be towards the top end of the model. If we're looking at an approach proximity bucket, 150 to 225 would be where I'd focus on. A lot of your par 4s and your par 3s are going to be in that sort of range, and with the exception of a few of the longer par 4s where you might have something over that, this is where a vast majority of your iron shots are going to come from. So you've got some small sample size poppers towards the top, guys that are on the Corn Ferry Tour, maybe that we haven't seen very often, but when you get down here to the Carl Phillips of the world, your Shane Lowrys, your McIlroys, your Matty Schmids, these are the kind of players that we've seen often. We know that it's not a small sample size thing with these sort of players, and they deservingly should get a bump up in your model. So Arroyo Hisatune, a Michael Thorbjornsen, Emiliano Grillo, and Antoine Rosner and Rico Hoey, all players that stand out when you look at that stat. And then the last one we've got on here would be your par 4 scoring. Because it is a par 70, we do have the 2 extra par 4s. So trying to find players that do their best work on that type of hole could also be something to help you out a bit. So you have some small sample size guys like a Roger Sloan, also Luke Clanton at the top. But in general, your guys with bigger sample sizes like a Keith Mitchell, Castillo, Rory McIlroy, Goddard, and Harry Hall, all potentially worth a little boost as well. So if we go ahead and sort this by model ranking, you guys can see the top of our model over here. Shane Lowry, number 1, which with his form heading in was kind of what I was expecting to see. Rico Hoey, though, a little bit more surprising. Not surprising after we've gone through the stats. I mean, he's green or at least neutral in all these categories, but not somebody heading into the week I was expecting to see towards the top here. Sun GM, though, I was expecting to see. Rory McIlroy is by far the best player in the field, so he better be top 5 in any sort of model that you're running. But your Corey Connors of the world, your Andrew Putnams, your Keith Mitchells that can ball strike a golf course to death are also players that I was expecting to see up here. And there's a very good chance that of those handful of players that we just pointed out, that I'm playing most, if not all of them, for some sort of exposure. So that's how I see this sort of golf course. If you guys want to find comp courses to add on top of that, you can take a look at the Truist Championship. That's another Northeastern golf course, par 70 as well. So the same kind of setup. There's always going to be differences, nuances to all these different courses, but this same kind of stat profile that played well there should be pretty good for this week. You also got Muirfield Village. So just last week, it is a par 72 as opposed to the par 70, but it's about keeping yourself out of that 4-inch rough, some tricky greens, which it should be the defense of a TPC Toronto. And then the last one we have here would be Hamilton Golf and Country Club. So the home of the RBC Canadian last year. It was a little bit more demanding off the tee, I would say, just because of the angles, and it was a little bit tighter than what we're going to have for this year, but the same 4-inch rough, the same sort of agronomy up there in Canada. So it's not a perfect comp course. None of these are. You're never really going to find perfect comp courses on the PGA Tour, but I think there's enough crossover, even whether it's Hamilton or even some of the other RBC Canadian Open courses, that you can use for that leaderboard crossover. So those are the sort of things that I'm looking for in my plays this week to try and find an outright or two and try and take down a GPP. Alrighty guys, that is all I've got for the course breakdown. Smash that like button if you guys haven't already, and go ahead and give me your guess for the winning score this week. And if you end up getting it right, you'll win a free month access to my Patreon page. It'll be on a first come first serve basis, so go ahead, claim your score before anyone else goes ahead and takes it themselves. And on the Patreon page is where you can find all of my analysis. That includes the spreadsheets that I'm doing for DFS, also all the prop stuff for Underdog and Prize Picks, and you get that free of charge if you end up getting that winning score correct. So go ahead, claim your player. I appreciate your support in the channel, as you guys always do. Smash that like button if you haven't already, and also subscribe to the channel so you guys don't miss any of the content to come. That will of course include our DFS and betting preview, which will be dropping on a little bit later on this evening, our Wednesday live streams, which will have DFS covered at 7 p.m. on the Ship It Nation YouTube channel, and then at 8 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesday is when we're going to cover props for round 1 at this event. So if you're an Underdog or Prize Picks player, make sure to stop on by for that live stream on Wednesday night, and for the DFS live stream, the fantasy live stream, and all those questions, make sure to tune into the Ship It Nation YouTube channel this Wednesday for that. But that's all I've got, guys. I hope to see your names towards the top end of some of those contests that are out at Betting Card. It'd be nice to go out there and try and get a winner this week as well. Stay tuned for all the content, and I'll see you guys a little bit later on.